שיר המחלות, אשא עיני אל הגרים, מאין יבוא עזרי. עזרי מעם אדוני, עושה שמים וארץ. אל ייתן למות רגלך, אל ינום שומרך. הנה לא ינום ולא ישן, שומר ישראל. אדוני שומרך, אדוני צילך, עליית ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה, וירח בלילה. אדוני שמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך. אדוני ישמור את צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד העולם.
Kol omer kra v'amar ma'ekra, kol habasar chatzir, v'chol chasto katzitz hasadeh, yavesh chatzir navel tzitz ki ruach Adonai nashva bo. Achen chatzir ha'am, yavesh chatzir navel tzitz u'devar Eloheinu yakum li'olam. A voice says, cry out. But I ask, what shall I cry? All flesh is like grass, and all of its beauty is like the flower of the field. The grass withers, and the flower fades, when a wind from God blows upon it. Surely, therefore, people are like grass. The grass withers, and the flower fades, but the word of God endures forever. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai ro'i lo echsar binoteshe yarbitzeni. Almei menuchot yinahaleni. Nafshi yeshovev, yancheni v'maglei tzedek leman shemo. Gam ki elech begeit salmavet lo ira ra, ki ata imadi. Shiftacha umishantecha, hema yinachamuni. Ta'aroch lefanai shulchan neged sorai. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He has me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He guides me on paths of righteousness. He revives my soul for the sake of his glory. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no harm, for you are with me. Your staff and your rod, they comfort me. You set a table in sight of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall abide in the house of the Lord forever. WVIZ once made repeated attempts to entice your mother to do a cooking show and to show off some of her astonishingly delicious and overwhelming recipes. They offered her a limousine, I understand. They offered her every opportunity to show the world what you folks already knew, that no one was better in the kitchen than your mom. But she turned them down because, as you said, no one could force Susan to do something she didn't want to do. It had to be her choice. And there's a reason why she had the power to choose. The reason she had the power to choose is because she was a free woman in a free country. And the mark of freedom is the ability to choose and make your decisions. I think your mom was very much aware that freedom is not something you take for granted. She had to work for that freedom. She suffered fear and heartache in striving for that freedom. And when she achieved it, she relished it and she held on to it. You told me she called the shots. She made the decisions, that she never met an argument she didn't win. But all of that determination and all of that strength and all of that desire to be in control, and she wanted to be in control, that can only happen when you have freedom. Susan wasn't always free, and she wasn't always able to be in control earlier in her life. And clearly, once she achieved freedom, she seized control of it with two hands and never let it go. Earlier in her life as a child, as a teenager, it was the opposite. She had almost no control over the events of her life. Her mother died when she was 2. She had no control over that. She never really knew her mother. Her dad, a shoemaker, could never really devote enough time, of course, to take care of a little girl, and she was regularly sent to different relatives to be cared for. She spent a period of time, I understand, at the age of 5 with one of the wealthy families in town, but that didn't work out either. It was a childhood filled with disruption. When Susan was 8, her father remarried, and that was also not a good situation. Again, something that was out of her control. She was close with her brother, and ultimately she ran away when Susan was 15 years old. She never saw her father again. All of these early events helped to produce a personality that was, on the one hand, vivacious and magnetic and lively, the center of many a room, someone who was used to starting over with new people again and again, but also a person who got through it by being tenacious, determined, but also worried, with fears of having her world turned upside down again and again. As a young lady, she was engaged to a young man, but evidently his family didn't like her social standing, her economic standing. In other words, she wasn't good enough. And then the war came. At first, Jews had to wear the stars on their clothing. Eventually, deportation began and work camps, and her life was in danger. You know, the teenager of today, or someone in their 20s, is filled with anxiety because of test scores and college acceptances. And will I be liked or popular enough? And will I go to the dance? Your mom would have loved any of those problems. But she wasn't worried about test scores and proms. She was worried about her life and her survival, about choices that were made that led to either life or death. Your mother's life reads like a movie, and I don't mean to trivialize this moment. Although I don't think you could write such a script. It's too improbable. When you knew her, you knew that she didn't want to accept any favors from anyone. She didn't want to be in anyone's debt. She didn't want to owe anybody anything. And that is such irony, because this woman who didn't want to owe anyone anything owed everything, owed her life and her future and everything else to one person, to a non-Jewish childhood best friend, her lifelong friend Elaine, who was Catholic. And when the Nazis invaded Budapest, Elaine risked her own life to save your mother's. She gave Susan her old identity papers from before Elaine got married, so it had a different last name. And Susan used these old identity papers and became, in the eyes of the law, a new person with a Catholic faith. She basically assumed Elaine's old identity. She moved into a different neighborhood, began to attend a church. I mean, this is like a spy movie. And it's documented, though, that the Jews who did survive could not have done so without the help of good people of different faiths, who came up with a plan, who looked the other way, who found a shared humanity with the Jew involved, and did not let hate trump love. It is also true that the Jewish world wishes there had been more individuals who would have acted in this selfless way. But we lovingly honor those brave and conscientious individuals that did do so. And Elaine had a brother who was a Nazi. And she told her brother if he would reveal the secret, she would kill her brother. She would kill him. That's how loyal Elaine was. And Elaine's plan worked, even to the point where she suggested that Susan go to confessional in her church and say something that would make the priest remember her and vouch for her as a Catholic. Elaine suggested that Susan confessed to some very colorful sins, which Susan obliged. She confessed she had been with many men during the prior week in an intimate way. And Susan won her first Academy Award for Best Actress in a Lead Role. And again, I do this not at all to trivialize. There is something quite serious, psychologically here. Your mother grew up never being able to just be who she was. Your mother could never be herself. As a child, she was shuttled into different homes. And to be herself then later, as a young lady, to reveal she was Jewish would be to die. What goes on in the head of someone who has to play the modern version of Queen Esther, who has to hide her identity as a Jew, or Moses, who has to hide his identity as a Jew? She'd be summoned, I understand, with others. She was working somewhere. Again, she was Catholic now, at least officially. She'd be summoned with others to go see the authorities round up the Jews and kill them, as they did every day at 11 o'clock in the morning. It was a civic event. It was a daily event. Bring lunch, and let's watch this take place. What does that do to someone? I know one side effect of this. When Susan did achieve freedom, she remained very proud of who she was. As a Jew, as a woman, as a successful person, as an American, as a sophisticated person. And she bristled at anyone who implied anything that remotely seemed like disrespect. Your dad had been the jewelry salesperson who had sold the engagement ring to the man who was going to be your mother's husband before that engagement broke. I guess that sequence of events is about as likely as everything else that happened in your mother's life. Your mother and your father were perhaps the only survivors of their hometown of marriageable age after the war, and they got married. They never dated. They were never engaged. They got married. He showed up after the war and took her to a courthouse to be married. She was the high energy part of the relationship. She made the decisions, but he was a very good anchor for her with a dry sense of humor and an ability to roll with the punches. And your father needed to do a lot of rolling over the years. Your dad was a watchmaker, eventually owned a jewelry store, and he and your mom were exceedingly effective as working partners. Your mom was a sensational salesperson. She could make people feel very good about their purchases, and I guess to use her words, she made people feel gorgeous. And everywhere she went, Susan was able to make friends, to meet, and to endear herself to people. She always looked sharp, cared about her appearance, cared about her weight. Presentation was very important. And she and your father respected each other and had complementary skills, enjoyed certain activities like to go to Las Vegas and Florida, always were together with the family on Friday nights and Sundays, and really went everywhere together. Your dad undoubtedly lived longer, even in ill health, because she pushed him. She pushed him to get out and do things, and she made sure his life would be full. Hers may be a story worth having as a movie, but beyond the lights and the camera and the action, getting to freedom, achieving freedom, had its impact on her. It was near impossible. It was difficult for any of you to be too far out of her sight because she was afraid of losing you, and she was afraid of something bad happening to you. After all, it had already happened in her own life. It was impossible for her not to want to control all aspects of your lives, which could not have been easy on you. And she would never back down, ever. I know you saw near impossible feats accomplished in commercial interactions because of her strength, whether it was buying cars or making wedding albums, but it was also restrictive when it came to your day-to-day life. I think in the end, it's not a question of whether this was all easy. It was not. But she was your mother, and if you loved her, then you understood her, because that's the definition of love, is to try to understand someone else. She was haunted by her experiences. She had survived them. She was a survivor. But there were ghosts that she lived with and haunting memories. She loved babies. She adored children. Perhaps they represented for her freedom. Maybe they represented for her the future in a free land. But she had fears. I once showed, I would visit her sometimes in the house in South Euclid. And one day I showed up and a policeman was there. And I saw him on the outside. And he said, we come, sometimes she calls us to tell us that they're coming to get her. And we always go to her house. We always come over. We knock on the door. And we make sure to tell her that it's all right. And why in the world would we expect anything different? There's the story when she was posing as a Catholic, she had to take the earnings of that day in the office, she had to take and go across the bridge where she had to deposit the money in the bank on the other side of the town across the bridge. But she that day was the last one on the train. So even as it was pulling out, she was holding on. And the conductor just sort of pushed her off the train because it was all crowded. And she fell to the ground, and moments later the bridge they were crossing blew up. And everyone on that rail car was killed. How would anyone handle these stories of the randomness of life? That's not randomness out of a philosophy book. That's something that she was living in her life. We must understand that she held the experience of Jewish history in her hands and in her heart and in her head. And the bottom line, the lesson to be cultivated, what she cultivated out of Jewish history, was to survive and to live another day and to be proud of who you are and to protect the ones you love. And that's why all the fierceness and all the pride and all the strength and all the worry came down to family. Came down to family. Came down to you, all of you. Nothing was more important to her in her identity, in terms of the haunting memories of the past, in terms of what she wanted to build as a free person in the future. Nothing could be more important than family. Family gatherings, even her home, her kitchen, her cooking was all about family. I know the portions were Olympic-sized. What's that phrase, supersize me? I think your mother invented it. The recipes were handed down undoubtedly from Mount Sinai, right? Designed to expand any waistline. Would you tell me, a plate of brownies every day? Every day of your childhood to finish a plate of brownies? However we look to incorporate those events, however you look to incorporate these events into your life, and like in any situation, you're going to take qualities you admire about your mother and know that in some areas you're going to do your own thing in terms of qualities. But the story of her life was, life is a gamble. But when you win, you savor the fact that you win. She won. It didn't always put her life at ease, but to the best of her ability, she tried to understand the lessons of all that had happened to her. She lived with a good name, and she died with a good name. Want to call in the family?
Excuse me. Mom, you taught us and proved to us that no goal is unobtainable, and that the word no was meaningless when coming from somebody else. Your intense persistence was an inspiration to all of us. Since the beginning of time, no mother ever loved her family more than you. I miss you.
Let's rise for the memorial prayer.
Rachamim, Shochayna Bamramim, Hametzemeno Chanechona, Tachat Kanefei Ashkina, B'machalot Kedoshim Udhorim, Kezo Gargarakia Mazgerim, Et Nishmat Shendel Bat Wolf Shagalacha Legolama Baganeden Et Menuchata Hanabavala Rachamim והסתירה בסתר כנפיך לעולמים. ותצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתה, אדוני ונחלתה, ותנוח בשלום על משכבה, ונאמר Amen.
May we remember all of the worthy and the righteous deeds that she performed while in the land of the living. God is now her portion. May she rest in peace. And we all say Amen. Let's be seated. We want to offer our condolences to the family, and we do so at this time to Peter and Margaret, to Bob and Kathy, to Rick and Susan, to the grandchildren, Brian and Yang, Lisa, Julie and Ben, Lexi, and Gabrielle. The family will be receiving visitors for the Shiva visitation in Solon at the home of Kathy and Bob Weiss, 5340 Parkside Trail in Solon. That's today following services until 9 p.m. Once again, till 9 p.m. today. The address is 5340 Parkside Trail in Solon. We're now going to arrange the processional to move us to the burial portion of the service. Please remain in your seats for another moment. The pallbearers should now come forward.